Hello, everybody, and welcome back to day 5 of Into the Mythica, Wisdom and Secrets from Our Primordial Past. I am your host for this event, Jocelyn Starfeather, and I am thrilled to be here with Dr. John Ryan. Welcome, John. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
Oh, thank you, Jocelyn. It's a delight for me to be here, and a big welcome to all of the audience as well.
Yes, absolutely. And it is wonderful to have you here. And so everybody go on over to the chat and put your name and location there so we can welcome you and see where you are joining us from today. And while you're doing that, I'll go live on YouTube as well. We'll bring in our YouTube audience here. Okay, so we're live on YouTube now. So YouTube audience, welcome back as well to day 5 of Into the Mythica. So excited to gather with you once again today for all the magic that we will share together. And I am thrilled to be here with Dr. John Ryan. And so, John, I will share your bio and introduce you to everybody in case they may not know you. John Ryan, MD, is a professor of medicine and practitioner of energy and consciousness-based medicine. He is an author, Unity Field Healing Volume 1, Foundations of Energy Medicine and Quantum Healing, and the founder of Unity Field Healing, or UFH, a new quantum process based on conscious activation of the DNA field to support healing and personal evolution. He channels the Syrian Blue-White Collective, who support UFH and humanity's ascension by DNA enhancement through monthly transmissions and channeled messages. And John, I've been following your work for many years now, and it's just always so inspiring. I feel this, first of all, it's incredible that you began as a medical doctor and then had this experience of coming into energy healing, which I know you'll speak about a bit today. But also these transmissions that you're bringing through from the Syrian Blue-White Collective are so powerful for us at this time. So I just want to give you a wholehearted thanks, much gratitude for all the work that you do.
Oh, that means a lot, Jocelyn. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. So your topic for today is quantum DNA, star seeds, and the origins of divinity. And so to begin then, for our viewers who some people may be new to your work, can you tell us about your history as a physician and as a healer and the visions that you've received to guide your work? How did you come to be doing all of this?
Sure, yeah. So, so going back in time, as you mentioned, my training is in medicine. So I was in medical school, we'll say, back in the 1980s. And just as I was finishing up my medical studies, I began to have energy experiences. And so I wasn't really a spiritual seeker, and I wasn't training in yoga or doing anything to kind of trigger this experience. It just kind of happened spontaneously around 1987, which for those who are tuned into the ascension paradigm might recognize as the Harmonic Convergence. And what I started to live was what I call today a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. Now, at the time when I was living this, I really didn't know what I was living. I started to have these funny experiences. Like I would lay down and my body would begin to vibrate, and I would see lights or light fields around people as I was looking at them. And I began to have very vivid dreams. And then all of a sudden I began to have these spontaneous out of body type experiences. And when I was going to sleep, I'd pop out of my body and I would have very conscious experiences moving around the room and being able to move through the wall and then come back into the room or travel in this astral body. And it was a little scary for me, I'll be honest, at the time when I started to live this, because I really didn't have a frame of reference for what was happening. I didn't know anything about Kundalini energy or spiritual energy or healing or anything like that outside of the traditional medical paradigm. And but as fate would have it, when spirit kind of shakes us awake, things happen, and then we're also given the guidance or the pathway to follow to understand the experiences that we're each living. And so what happened for me was I was drawn one day. I woke up with this sudden awareness. It was like, it was an intuition, but it was really profound. It was like an intuition that took over my mind, if you will, that I had to go to this bookstore. And so it was a bookstore I had never gone to, but it was a holistic type bookstore back in the day. And when I went into the store, I was a little overwhelmed because it was a house, like an old house, like a castle kind of a house. And every room had books of different kinds, like crystal healing or spiritual healing or Eastern systems of spirituality. But now this is back in 1987 when there was a lot less information available than there is today. But as I walked around the bookstore, I kind of felt deflated. I thought, how am I ever going to find what I'm looking for in this place? Like it's crazy. And then all of a sudden, as my eyes panned around the store, there was a book on the bookshelf that started to glow as if it had light inside it. And so I went over and took the book off the shelf. And the book was The Spontaneous Awakening of Kundalini by Gopi Krishna. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. And I read the back cover and I thought, this is some of the things I'm living. Like this is explaining, a little bit about what I'm living. So I knew for sure it was something I had to read. So I took the book and I started to leave the bookstore. And as I did, I was turning and another book on the bookshelf magnified the way today when you run a mouse over an icon on your computer, it'll magnify. As my eyes went over the bookshelf, this book kind of grew double in size. And I went over and pulled it off. And it was a book by Lee Carroll and Cryon. It was his very first book called The End Times. And it was about the energy process that we're all living through now, the ascension journey, if you will. And so I took both books, and looking back, I guess my life has never been the same. It launched me on a journey. And so it led me to begin to explore healing from a very different perspective than traditional Western medicine. I began to understand the reality of an energy-based world and the power of consciousness and how that affects energy prints in creation, and how our healing is so integral or integrally connected to consciousness. And that understanding just kept expanding because it leads eventually into a spiritual realm where you realize we're all spiritual entities. We're consciousness beings that have taken form in a body by design and for purpose. And we're all here at this point in time for a reason. And but it's the soul that's governing the experience, and the body is more the vessel, the opportunity to live in this world, if you will. It's the car we drive around in, or the vehicle we use to be here. And all of the experiences we live in it are profoundly connected to the soul, its teaching, and a discovery of its power. And so as we each live our lives, we encounter experiences, and some of them are health-related experiences. Others are spiritual-related experiences. Some are very human-related experiences, issues with relationships, or we have, a great success or a great failure in our personal life in some way or another. And we live these experiences that challenge us in different ways. But what we start to understand is it's by design. The soul has a purpose for the experiences we're living. And they're meant to, first of all, awaken us to an understanding of our spiritual nature, and then introduce us to the power, the consciousness, the capacity that we each have in that realm to bring experiences into the world. And so when people are healing, for example, this is one kind of experience. We all go through this journey where if you're facing a serious illness, you may be afraid for your life, and then you move through the layers of fear and you start to reconcile the experience. And if you move deeply into it, you can understand the purpose of the experience, and it takes you through a doorway where you heal an illness, and then it becomes a launching pad for a spiritual awakening, and often a guidepost that's telling you where you're going in your life, or how the future of your life is going to unfold from that point on. And so, it was many years where I learned many things, energetically speaking. I explored Eastern systems of healing and Reiki and energy healing. But a lot of my own personal journey was guided by experiences that I was having in my own consciousness. So I would, meditate and see things, or I would do healing work with people and begin to see things and know things. And so a lot of it was a personal journey, but there were there was a lot of information and support outside to kind of help keep me on my path, if you will. And I share that because I think it's important for people to understand that, you know, as each one of us is walking our pathway, the things we're living are by design. And there's a universe that loves us implicitly. It has our back every step of the way. And it will bring us everything we need to support us as we open ourselves to things we don't understand or that are new. And that, you know, that's kind of what I lived. And it introduced me to the world of healing. And then along the way, I began to have visions, excuse me, where in meditative states, I would have these kind of teachings, and they would arrive in a visionary way. I'd kind of get, you know, like a little video clip almost. It would be like a scene or a dream where I'd be shown all kinds of things at once. And it's really overwhelming because it's like you're given all this information and you're not quite sure what to do with it. You just kind of have to register it, and then you have to decode it or process it after the experience. And so what began to happen for me is I was shown information about different things energetically, about the energy bodies and all that kind of stuff. But it brought me into teachings around DNA. I began to see this unusual molecule of DNA. I recognized it from, you know, my scientific background, what it was, but it was an energy structure. And it was connected somehow to the soul. And I was taken on a journey where I was shown what happens when we incarnate, the energy of how we make choices before we come, how we bring together like kind of a package of energy that's tailored for that particular incarnation, and how each time we incarnate on the earth, we're coming and going. Our soul kind of births itself in different physical bodies. But each time we do that, we're bringing the energy from this big molecule. And so it's a place where we store energy and information that's very personal to our specific soul's journey and our own incarnations. And so I eventually recognized this was some kind of a quantum structure, or a quantum DNA, as I came to call it. And the healing ties into this because we can access energy and information from this space to bring healing and transformation into the physical world. So these visions kind of guided that whole process. It's a whole other story. I don't really have time to perhaps go into all of that now, but it kind of an overview of what happened. And it began to make me realize that we could access healing that was really from a space outside the physical world, or we could travel into the spirit world and begin to bring healing into the physical world, kind of in a shamanic way of understanding. And so that's really eventually what led to this. And one of the most profound experiences I lived was right after a trip to Egypt. And I remember as I tuned into a couple of the presentations during the week, and I know, Jocelyn, too, you're spending some time in Egypt these days. And it was a really profound catalyst for me to remember aspects of this work. When I came back from, you know, a 2-week journey in Egypt through all of the sacred sites, when I came home, I had a very vivid, visionary type experience. And it was really what launched the work of unity field healing that we can go into a little bit later. So I just share that because it really all ties together.
Yes, it sure does. And Egypt is such an initiatory point for all of us, really. Great place of remembering who we really are. Sharing your story. And I think this is so important. And for many in the audience who may be going through something like this, or may have gone through something like this, you know, recently, how, you know, each of our awakening stories is different. And yet there are these, you know, key things that happen, or just knowing that if unexplainable things are happening, it's okay. And to trust.
Very much.
Yeah.
Very much.
And to know, as you said, we're being guided toward our highest self, our highest contribution in the world, you know, and true magic happens when we surrender to that path.
Yeah, well said.
So can you tell us next about Lemuria and the Pleiadian mothers?
Okay, so this is a big topic. So when we look back at ancient history, we're starting to uncover now architectural finds, historical finds. We're decoding information that's been printed in hieroglyphs in different places that wasn't understood, previous to this point in time. And we're starting slowly to track a human history that's very different than the one we know, the post-Sumerian world that we're all aware of. And so as we look back through this, expanding knowledge, what we begin to understand is there are records, there are actually true records of civilizations that existed on the earth prior to the one we know today as our modern humanity. And so there's, records of Atlantis, and the theory that, as the Atlantean civilization fell, there was a migration of knowledge and people from that place to Egypt, which kind of launched the Egyptian civilization. The interesting thing about Egypt is when we go back through time, we realize the zenith of the experience was at the beginning. And that's very unusual because, today, you start to develop something new. Someone has an idea for a computer and you make a very rudimentary computer, and then knowledge is added and experience. And then all of a sudden you have a quantum computer, but you build from little to more. But the peculiar thing about Egypt was it started with the most. And then from that point forward, everything was a little bit less luminous or a little bit less wise, I guess, so there was a decline in knowledge over the vast trajectory of the ancient time. And it's important for us to, I think, to understand that because we realize there was a teaching at the beginning. There were beings that came to be part of the experience at the beginning, and they taught us. And the seeding of the civilization was with the assistance of that kind of wisdom and support. And so as that was kind of withdrawn and we were left to carry forward, then we had to live the experience for ourselves as human beings. That's the way I understand that. And so the time of Atlantis is only one, signpost in time. But if we go a little deeper, there are many other civilizations that have existed. Now, most of them are covered up by mounds of earth and oceans. So we don't actually have archaeologic records of these places, but people have visionary experiences where they've come to know the reality of these places in their memories, in their Akashic memory, deep in they're seated deeply in the Akash. And so I've always been aware of a civilization called Lemuria, and I knew somehow I had participated in that civilization, not from any proof or from scientific perspective, but really from an innate knowing. It's really from, things I've seen in visions and experiences, but nothing I could ever prove in the 3D world. But many people in different places of the world began to have memories. There's a collective memory. There's the whole human civilization has a collective memory of this time. And what I understand about Lemuria is that it was a seeding civilization. It's where Hawaii currently exists in the Pacific Ocean. So the islands of Hawaii are the tip of a mountain. And this mountain is a landmass that is the actual biggest structural mountain on the planet. And so most of it is covered by the ocean. And all we see as Hawaii is the very, very, very tips of the mountains. But back in the day, the mountain was actually lifted. It was out of the water. There was a lava field under the landmass pushing the mountain up. And so it existed not as 7 islands, but as one island in the ocean. So it was kind of like a whole mountaintop that had peaks. And this was the foundation of Lemuria. This was the landmass, we'll say, that was Lemuria. But it was a civilization that was guided in its development by the arrival of the 7 sisters. And so when we go back through indigenous teachings, every indigenous culture has a memory, a verbal transmitted memory of the origin of humanity back to the Pleiades and back to the 7 sisters. And it's understood sometimes to represent the 7 stars in the Pleiadian cluster, but actually there were also 7 women who came from the Pleiades, 7 mothers, who came and they seeded what we would refer to as divinity into the DNA of evolving humanity. Now, that's a very big statement. It's a lot to digest if that's kind of unusual information for you. But the way to think of it is like this. We have to think galactically in order to understand this story. there are planets that are created to receive civilizations. And there's a timing to the evolution of these civilizations. So many people today recognize that Earth is the offspring of star civilizations, the Pleiades, the Syrians, the Lyrians, the Arcturians, and so on. But the Earth was created as a very special environment to seed a potential divine civilization or an ascended civilization. So it was earmarked, if you will, to be that in the future. And there was a lot of preparation that went into that. So the planet had to be formed. There was the development of nature, the land masses, all the perfect conditions on the planet for life to exist. We're aware in the fossil records that the Earth has gone through all these oscillations where different kinds of entities and beings and animals and all these things lived on the planet for a period of time and came and went. We're aware of turbulence in the development. We recognize, there were big oceans that washed away land masses and land masses that moved, and volcanoes and earthquakes and all kinds of things that were part of that development. But in simple terms, it was a preparation. It was the development of a planet that could contain the balance that would allow nature to seed and then to begin the growth of life from that foundation. But when we speak in galactic terms, that takes thousands and thousands of years. That's why, it's not like you decide tomorrow to create a new planet for civilization and it exists. It has to be developed the same way anything does that comes into creation. And so the Earth arrived at a point where it was ready to receive this divine impulse, if you will. And so there were beings that were developing human forms, like within nature, there were human forms that were developing. But when the mothers came, they brought with them a very special quantum attribute, and they seeded this divine consciousness into the evolving human being. And so these mothers came and they seeded genetically, if you will, this information into the evolving human structure, human being. And they also brought teachings. And so they existed with us for a very long time, and they taught us about things. And there were human beings who existed in this civilization. From what people remember, like Lee Carroll, for example, has channeled information about Lemuria. And what he explained in his understanding was, or in Cryon's presentation, is that the souls who came to be part of the Lemurian civilization only came one time. So we've all reincarnated since that point in time in different civilizations, but in this civilization, each soul only came once. And there were souls that were born of the Pleiadian mothers. There's a whole group of human beings who were actually offspring of these mothers when they came to the Earth. And then the families evolved from there. And so the quantum information that was seeded into humanity from that point forward then spread. So as the human beings on the planet began to have families and children, and the forward movement of all that, then this new structural way for the DNA to exist was transmitted through reproduction. And so, but when the mothers were here at the beginning, they taught us many, many things about the nature of life, cycles, the incarnation, the way spirit works, all this kind of stuff, how to work with nature. And a lot of the indigenous teachings that exist to this day go back to that seeding of teaching. They go back to that time when we were taught these things by star beings. And so this is why it's so profoundly present in all of the indigenous memories and the wisdom that's carried forward, because it really is seeded back to that point in time. Now, I was told that I lived in this time. I was one of the children of the mothers, and I worked in a temple called the Temple of Rejuvenation that was part of Lemuria. And it's a place where we worked with nature and quantum energy and crystalline energy to bring restitution, or to restore the body, to heal the body, and to keep balance in the body. And a lot of the visions that I've been experiencing since that time are memories. They're things that we used at that point in time to work with. And so it helped me understand why I'm having these recollections or this knowledge that's kind of coming back. And lots of people are living this. There's nothing special for me to say that. It's something that a lot of human beings are living. But humans who are drawn to this today, like for example, the whole audience who's listening right now to this Mythica conference are people who have this in their Akash. That's, you start to understand there's a magnetism. Something draws us to things, or we find ourselves in certain experiences or exposed to certain pieces of information. But the reason that happens in a bigger metaphysical, synchronistic kind of way is because our soul has put us there. So everybody listening, you yourself, Jocelyn, everybody who's listening to this has a connection to these times, or you wouldn't be here. That's just the way it works. And so we're starting to remember this today because we're going through a big process on the planet. Well, we can take some time to go in that if you like, but it's a memory that's awakening, and it's teaching us things that we need to know to be prepared to handle the energetic shift of what's happening on the planet right now. So civilizations have come and gone since that time, but the seeding of the divinity, the restructuring of the DNA in the human body to be able to recognize that it is a divine being, a being that has a quantum connection to the source. It has a higher self and a soul that reincarnates over and over, and a whole field of experience much vaster than any single incarnation. That whole aspect of divinity began in this time. And it was created through a quantum integration of information or energy that we can talk about, but it was brought into humanity at that point in time. So other civilizations that have come since then, Atlantis, various civilizations we don't even remember. Atlantis would be one of the more recent ones. They still all tie back to this time of Lemuria, because it's when the DNA was set up for us to exist as spiritual beings in form. So it was the beginning of the divinization, or the anchoring of divinity into the human structure. And so all of the other humans that have emerged after that point in time have been touched by the genetics, by the experience of the Pleiadian mothers. So we all kind of emerge from that same source. Now, there have been other influences of energy and star beings and things since that time. We can talk a little bit about that, particularly if we talk about the Syrians, but we still all go back to that original time. And then things that have happened since that point in time have been experiences, and many of them have been experiences of the nature of duality. When we go back to this original time, the special thing about this civilization was it lived in perfect unity. It lived in oneness as a human collective, but oneness with the planet, one with nature, one with galactic knowledge. It lived an experience that was much simpler than the times of modern day, but it was an experience of unity. And the reason that's so important is, as we go forward from this day into the future, we need to rekindle that understanding. And it's seeded in us. It's there as a seed knowledge, but it has to flourish. It has to be rekindled and reborn within each one of us. And so we all have it in there, and we just have to bring it out. And that's the experience we're living through this ascension process. We're remembering the brotherhood and the sisterhood of humanity. We're remembering everything about us is intimately connected to nature, and we can have a relationship with nature and a communication with nature. There are elements of the natural kingdom that have so much to teach us and to remind us if we're open-minded and we understand. And so you can see how it ties into the Mythica, because it's all there, and it's all through this communication that we hold in this unified space. And so that's one of the ways of understanding what's happening in the ascension journey. So a bit of a long answer, but I hope time well spent.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And yeah, you have a way of taking these concepts that are very hard to grasp and really grounding it and making it accessible and concrete for us to understand. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I just happen to have an image of the Hawaiian Islands and all that's underwater. Do you mind if I share it real quick? It
Please,
perfectly
yeah, go
illustrates
ahead.
what you were saying. And I was just reading an article about this the other day. So isn't that amazing?
Oh, there you go. Look.
Bountifully. And the little pieces that we see are just these over here. So
Yeah.
really amazing. So I have a question about, you've spoken about the Pleiadian mothers, and you are in connection with the Syrians as well. So, and then I know, some of us feel connected to the Arcturians or to other star systems. So how does all of this tie in? I feel like this is like our cosmic mythology. How do we understand these different star families that we come from?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And people have brought forward different aspects of information. There's a lot of true information, but there's also confusing information, or sometimes, frankly, misinformation about the way things work, or about the nature of the relationship of some of these star families to the Earth, and so on. The easiest way to think about it is as a sequence, because we're linear. Like we're as human beings, we have a linear frame of mind. We start with an idea, we manifest the energy to create the idea, we move forward, and from this point to that point, something happens. But when you move into quantum understanding, or a truer nature of the essence of reality than just a physical 3D world, things don't happen the same way. They happen kind of simultaneously, or in parallel realities, or in probability fields, and all these kinds of things. So quantum reality is very different than 3D reality. So we need to understand that first. And the reason I say that is, no matter what we understand, it's going to be somewhat limited. And it's because we don't have yet the brain capacity to process this kind of information in a truly representative way to the way that it exists. But we can think of it in linear terms. So, for example, as we speak about the Pleiadians and their relationship with the Earth, they seeded the divine potential within humanity. So, in an interesting way, they are our star parents. They are the beings from the stars that are most intimately related to the Earth. And so they are the parents. Now, the way that things work in a galactic process is there's a seeding, there's a teaching, there's an anchoring of knowledge and wisdom, and then you're left as a civilization to go through the field of duality. And that's a very important part of the development of an ascended civilization. You have to go through the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or the worlds of polarity, so that as conscious beings, you understand the nature of duality and how to harmonize those polarities within a single being. And so we can't do that without an experience. And so after this seeding, then a civilization will go through this process. So like we're living now, the Pleiadians lived before. And so they went through their own, seeding of information, their own struggles, their own ups and downs as an evolving civilization. They went through their own ascension process. They anchored in higher levels of consciousness and wisdom. And then they continued to grow as a stellar civilization, or an ascended civilization. And humanity is at the threshold of this process. We're about to go into a world of ascension. And so the Pleiadians are like our parents, but before the Pleiadians, they had parents. They also had a star civilization that seeded them. And so we would go back to the Syrians and the Arcturians and the Lyrians. We would go back through time. Now, I don't think it's as linear as saying the Arcturians are the parents of the Pleiadians, or the Syrians are the parents of the Pleiadians, but I feel most intimately this is just pure speculation from my intuition. I go from the Pleiadians to Syrians to Arcturians, and then back through Lyrians and back through the Orion system. And so there's been a chain of evolution that's been part of it. And but we can think of it mostly in family terms. So all of these star civilizations have a very profound relationship to the Earth. So we might think of as with children, the parents are the closest to the children, but the parents also play a very specific role with the children, as do the grandparents. And so grandparents are very different than parents. They're much more easygoing. They get to spoil and love and do all kinds of things without having to deal with the responsibility and the teachings that necessarily go along with being a parent. So you can kind of see how there's a different role that they play. But when a civilization is primed for ascension, all of these people are going to come, all of these beings are going to come, and they're going to be there in an incredibly supportive and profound way to be the cheering section, to be the force of inspiration and energy that's, cheering on the success of the earth as it makes this next movement in time. So people are starting to have memories. Now, as souls, we're living now on the earth, but many of us have lived in other star systems. And so often what we feel the draw to is where we have spent time that's becoming a little closer to our consciousness right now, because it plays a role in the role we're going to play ourselves in the ascension. So for example, if you've spent time in Arcturus and the things that you experience there are going to be important for you on your mission right now, it'll come very close in consciousness to you. But that doesn't mean you don't have a relationship with the Syrians or the Pleiadians. You may have lived in these civilizations as well. But your soul is here now, but you're going to connect with what is most important. And so I had to figure out that puzzle for myself, because I was having all these kind of Pleiadian experiences, and then all of a sudden these Syrian beings show up. And I'm thinking, well, who are you and why are you here? But it was through that I came to understand the answer that I just gave you.
Okay. Wow. Thank you. That's really helpful. I had not ever perceived of it that way, as the different civilizations have helped each other throughout galactic history, or whatever we might call it.
Which makes sense, doesn't it?
Across all the myths. But yeah, it definitely makes sense. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, so you've spoken about the DNA, and I know that's also at the core of the healing work you do. So can you tell us about the 24th chromosome, and why is that important?
Sure, yeah. So when I go back to these visions I was having, and sometimes people are very visual and they like to see things. On the website, I have a description of this and pictures. So if people really are drawn to it and they want to learn more about it, I would suggest they go and read about the Unity Field Healing work on my website, because there are pictures that kind of show some of these things from the visions that I had. But the DNA when we think of DNA as a human being, we typically have 23 pairs of chromosomes. And so there'll be all kinds of genetic information that's coded in this array of DNA. But when we look at mammals, most mammals have 24 pairs of chromosomes, and humans peculiarly have 23. Now, science is actually, we're not talking, visions and metaphysical information here. Now we're talking hardcore science, has discovered that the second chromosome is actually a fused chromosome. It previously existed as two pairs that merged into one. And the chromosome itself is bigger. So if you have your DNA chromosomes that are a certain size, the second chromosome is much bigger than the others. And they recognized by the position of the telomeres and the way the genes are structured that at some point in time there was a fusion. There were two separate chromosomes that merged into one. And since that point in time, it stayed that way. And when this goes back to a time frame of about somewhere between 50 and 200,000 years. That's a big window, but that's what science gives it as the time frame. Now, interestingly, the time when the Pleiadians first came to the Earth to begin to prepare the energy in the crystalline fields was about 200,000 years ago. And when Lemuria existed, it was really about 50 to 60,000 years ago, and then through a time frame up until about 15,000 years ago. And so when the Pleiadian mothers came, part of this seeding of divinity that we talk about actually brought a structural change to the DNA. Now, there's no way science can prove that. So you kind of have to have an open mind of understanding. But this is really what I was shown in the information that I've been given in my own experience. And so this merging of chromosomes, this merging of the second chromosome took place when the divinity was integrated into the DNA. And the way to think about that is the DNA before that was just like a substance like anything. It was like a piece of material of any kind. But when the divinity was merged with the genetic structure, it brought a quantum field. And in that quantum field is where the soul really makes contact with the physical world. And so the 24th chromosome is the energy that was created and integrated into the DNA. So it was two of the physical ones merged into one, and a quantum DNA was created. And so every soul has this chromosome. It's an energy structure that exists in a quantum level of reality, or an invisible level of reality. And so you have a 24th chromosome. I have a 24th chromosome. In the body that we each have today, we have the 23 pairs of chromosomes that come from the maternal and the paternal genetic contribution. But what I was shown is when a soul is being born, the energy of this 24th chromosome comes from the spiritual realm, if you will, or the invisible realm, and merges with the DNA in the zygote, the first cell of the developing human being. And so it creates a fusion between physical and energy, the spiritual energy. And the reason it happens like that is because our soul isn't limited to one incarnation. The soul comes and goes. And so if that happens, if we're just being really rational about it, at some point the soul has to merge with that body. Like the soul has to make a choice to be in connection with that physical body. And this is the way I was shown that happens in a quantum way. And so in this 24th chromosome, it's not limited to our personality or the person we know ourselves to be in this body. It's an expanded energy of the soul, and it has an Akashic memory of every lifetime you've ever lived on this planet. And if we go deeper into the structure, we even have memory of information on other planets or other aspects of galactic civilization. And so this energy comes with us each time we are reincarnating on the planet. And that's the nature of it. It's called many things. First, I was calling it the divine DNA or galactic DNA, because the series of visions, the way I was shown, I went back through a journey through the galaxy and then came back bringing this information. That's kind of how it happened in the vision that I was given. And when I came back, I was aware of this chromosome. And so it was like I went and retrieved it in a shamanic sense. It was like I went somewhere to get it and then brought it back to consciousness in the journey. And then it was activated in the process. So I was calling it divine DNA. But as the information was given to me over the years, I recognized it correlates to what we would really call a 24th chromosome, because it bridges the understanding of why we only have 23 pairs and how the divine energy connects to the DNA. The DNA is not limited to just structural things. Like the DNA we have in our body makes proteins and it does all the functional things to build a body. But this aspect of the DNA is information. And so it's a consciousness field as well as a whole blueprint for instructions and information, but it's tied into the nature of what our soul wants us to experience at a point in time. And so that's my understanding of the 24th chromosome. And it's really this that the Pleiadian mothers brought to us when they came so many years ago. When they showed me this, and I started to do the transmissions a couple of years ago, I was shown a vision of the mothers. And what happened was, in this vision, it was like we were in an amphitheater. And all of the mothers came. And in the front row of the amphitheater, it was the Pleiadian mothers. And behind them was Syrians and Arcturians and other civilizations of divine mothers that have been part of the whole galactic evolution of the spiritual family of life, or the family of light. And when the earth was being prepared, they were sitting in this place and they were singing, quantumly speaking. It was like they were emitting this vibration or putting out this energy that the only way we could describe it in our knowledge is they were singing. And as they sang, light took shape. And so they were singing into the middle of the amphitheater, and this light began to swirl and make all kinds of beautiful patterns. And then it started to take the form of what looked like a helix. But it was glowing in light. And then as it sat there, it kind of built in its energy and built in its energy. And then I was shown that it creates a fractal. And so it was like there were many, many versions of itself that started to spin off. And it was the way that I understood the vision was there's a core pattern to this divine DNA, and we each have a fragment of it that's connected to the original pattern. So it's still a system, but it was like the individualization of the energy, or the opportunity for that pattern to express itself through different forms. And so each one of us who is here today has a connection to the strand or the quantum version of that energy that was given to us through that original seeding. But it was a beautiful experience to see. It's the only time they've ever come into the transmissions, but they came to kind of show us how this all takes place from a quantum level of reality. So that's kind of the origins of the 24th chromosome, if you will.
Wow, wow, very incredible. Thank you for sharing that. And again, for explaining it so clearly. And this just, it just feels like our bodies and the way we are built and the layer of the physical with the multidimensional, it's such high technology.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That we take for granted because we're not informed about this in our normal,
exactly. Which is why it's important we remember.
Right. That's why it's important that we remember it now. Yeah. Yes. Is there anything else you want to say about that, about why we must remember now, and also, how does this relate to ascension and all that we're going through right now?
Yeah. So it's an interesting question. So the reason it's important we remember it now is it's awakening in us anyway. So as we go through the threshold of ascension, the Earth is moving into an energetic space in the galaxy where we're being influxed, if you will, or bombarded is the word that some people use, but I like the word influx a little bit better. We're being influxed with energy. The photon belt is the term that some people will use. But there's a field of galactic energy that's kind of flushing through the planet. And it's by design. There's a timing to all these things in a galactic sense. And so because the Earth is moving into this space, it's going to catalyze an energetic change. And in order for humanity to move into an ascension process, we actually had to be prepared for it. And so the spiritual teachings of times gone by, the religions of the day, the various Christian religions, Buddhist religions, Hindu religions, so on, all of the religions that taught about unity and peace and love, and the ambassadors who came to bring these teachings, the Buddhas, the Christs, the Mohammeds, the beings of light who came to seed these teachings, were all part of a spiritual pulse that was to prepare humanity to get ready for the future. And so there were teachings that were trying to teach humanity about our potential. If we learn to live in this, to be in the world, but not of the world, was the way Christ taught it. It was, yes, there's a 3D reality full of duality, but you can live in a different way. You can live in a space where you are a co-creator in spirit. You can forgive things that are not understood at a higher level of consciousness and intelligence. And so you can learn to begin to operate in what we might call 5D as opposed to 3D, which is where the world exists. And so all of the spiritual foundations of our planet taught this in some form or another. They're all teaching the same teaching if you really look carefully at what's being taught. And then those religions kind of spill into humanity, where they get mixed up with people who do understand and don't understand and think they understand, or use the understanding to have power and control, and all the kinds of distortions that happen. But if you go back to the true teaching, the teachings are pure. And so this is a really important thing, I think, for people to understand, particularly as we run into our conflicts now with religions on the planet. We realize the seeding is correct, but what's happened since then may not necessarily be aligned with the teaching. It goes back to what we were saying with Egypt. Its zenith was the beginning, but then after that, it had to filter through humanity and was twisted and distorted in different ways. And so now we're at a point where we're awakening. We're going through an ascension journey where we're all starting slowly to remember our spiritual origin. And it's a little different than has been taught by any system of teaching up to this point in time, because we're galactic beings. We're not limited to the earth. And none of the spiritual systems have really introduced that in any meaningful way. But it is the nature of the way it is. So it's time that we wake up, it's time we get the message and get that understanding. And so in the process of doing that, we are remembering a time when we knew. So it's like we're pulling out of our own history something that we're bringing forward to this day and time, not to recreate it, but to pull forward the wisdom to create from this day forward. Because the experience we lived between that seeding and now was duality, which is the experience we needed to know how to be masterful in the world of form. And so you don't want to throw that away. To go back to the original wisdom, you have to use the wisdom through that experience to anchor in a new potential or a new possibility. And as we do that, we will become an ascended civilization. And so there's a whole world that awakens with that. There's a whole way of being. There's a whole understanding of the nature of reality that, quantum physics is beginning to introduce this to the human mind and so on and so forth. So as we go into that space, we have to be ready, but it's a powerful space to live energetically. And in order to be there, you have to be spiritually mature enough to do that, to take on the potential for that. And so humanity had to be evolved to a point that it was ready to undergo the ascension. The Harmonic Convergence in 1987, for those who follow these things or understand this, was a time when the spiritual evolution of humanity was measured. Like, it's a way of asking the question is this civilization ready to take on the ascension? Could they do it? Because the Earth and the solar system was about to move into this energy space in the galaxy where we're going to be influxed with all this energy. And if we weren't ready, it would create a cataclysmic destruction. Like the Earth would have had to involute and try again. And that's happened before on the planet. But because humanity was spiritually mature enough to do it, it triggered a whole process of energy changes to begin to prepare the Earth to receive the ascension. And so some of that was a grid restructuring. The electromagnetic grid of the planet had to be altered. The crystalline grids that were put in place had to be awakened so that we could interface with the grids for knowledge and information and so on. So it's a big galactic thing. But all of that has to happen in the background for humans to be ready to step into this space. And so as humans today, this is what we're doing. Now, it seems slow. Like you think, oh, let's just get on with this. Let's just create peace on the planet. Let's stop the pollution and all that kind of stuff. But that's really just the beginning. As we go and we anchor all those things on the planet, that just sets the foundation for a whole different kind of a civilization to emerge on this planet, one that is divinely aware and that has a relationship with the whole galactic family of light and so on and so forth. So we're going to grow as a family, as a civilization in the future through this. And so that's why it's important now to remember, because we are pulling this wisdom forward. And as we do that, it helps us embody it. And so we learn it as ideas, we learn it as experiences, we have our own energy initiations, we go through transformations, we make decisions to realign our consciousness and our choices. And so we begin the groundwork of embodying this higher energy and this higher consciousness. And so connecting with it energetically or through the consciousness field is how we bring it forward and anchor it in form. And that's why it's so important. A lot of the illnesses and things that we experience in the body are related to the distortions of energy from the experiences between then and now. So we all have in our Akashic memory or energy, or things we've inherited, from our parental lines of energy, the potential for certain diseases and all that kind of stuff to exist in the body. But as we go through this quantum clearing in the system, a lot of healing takes place within those manifestations. It's kind of like if you release the energy that's causing the creation, then it goes away. So we're moving into a realm of more mystical healing. It's like we're reaching into the invisible, pulling in energy, and by the act of doing that, creating a different vibration in the body. And that can bring healing in different ways. The healing is kind of a side effect in a strange way. It's actually not the goal. It's the spiritual reintegration that's the goal. But in the act of living that, then healing takes place often very naturally within the body. So we begin to see how all these systems tie together, how all this information ties together, and why the access for many people to this knowledge is through healing or through the healing arts. Cryon, in his teachings, have said the people awakening first are the old souls. They're people who really go back to the beginning in consciousness. They're awakening now because they are anchoring. It's like you're a pillar. You're anchoring a light column. You're anchoring a field of light in the planet that's feeding the planet with knowledge and information. And in the act of doing that, making it available to the whole. Mm-hmm. And so, we're doing that through the things we're drawn to do, the things we're learning, the healing work we do, all this kind of stuff. These are actions, but something even more profound than that is fundamental. The fact that our being is the most important thing. Not even what we do with it, but our being is the most important thing. So just being here, alive on the planet at this time as a portal or as an access way for that light and energy to be here. And then the ways we bring it to life through the things we do, through the conferences we have, through the healing work we do, through the teaching we provide, through all of that is just icing on the cake in a strange way. Because fundamentally, it's the presence that is the most important thing to understand. And I always remind people of that because they think when they hear information or they see some of the magical things other people are doing, they say, well, what am I supposed to do? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know what my purpose is. And I always say the most important purpose any one of us has is to be here. Just being here alone right now because of what's happening on the planet is the most important thing. And then from that place, begin to create the things that bring you joy. And when you do that, you'll be really in alignment with your soul while you're doing your most important action, which is being here in the first place.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. That last part is so important, to do what we love, because that is always a key to what our contribution is meant to be here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes. Well, so I want to be aware of the time. I know we're getting close to
we could talk forever, Jocelyn.
It's been an amazing journey. Yes. Well, I if you have time, are you able to stay on till 15 after?
Yes, I'm free.
Okay, that would be wonderful. Would you mind sharing about the Syrian Blue-White Collective? Because I know that's a big part of what you're bringing through.
Yeah, so the Syrians came to me. So just chronologically going back through time, a lot of the work of the development of the unity field healing work that I do started around 2000. I started getting information, but didn't really put together the whole package of information until about 2014. And that's when I started to understand the ability to work with what I was being shown in an energy healing kind of a way, if you will. And so it turned into a process called unity field healing. But while I was living all of that, it was through intuition and then through experiences and then bringing it to life through doing sessions with people and all that kind of stuff. But then in 2019, I was in a meditation and I had a visitation and it was these light beings that came, and it came in my third eye as a ball of light. And then it kind of opened up into an array or a ring, and I could see it was a whole group of light beings. So they had a human type form or shape, but they were made of light, pure light. And the light was mostly white, but it had this tinge of blue, kind of like Mother Mary blue. It was a really pretty light blue color. all woven into the fabric of the white. And they began to communicate. They introduced themselves as the Syrian Blue-White Collective. And they said just to make it quick, they basically said they're a group of light beings from the Syrian star system. They have a very intimate relationship with the earth. They've been here before the beginning of humanity and through all the cycles of humanity. They've been here in more and less conscious ways through time. They mentioned that they were specifically here during the Egyptian times and that they were connected to Egypt. And there were times when they were here in form as well as in spirit. But even the times when they weren't here in form, they've always been here in the background or in the invisible realm, kind of guiding and supporting the process of humanity. And they said that the work of unity field healing they're part of that too. They've been overlighting the knowledge, the memory, the kind of supporting the development of that work. And they're there when we do the sessions. And so when we do the healing work, the Sirians will come and be part of the energy session. So when you're doing a session for somebody, you'll feel their presence in the space of doing the work. And they're there during the teachings and the practitioner initiations and all this kind of stuff. But they said they've been doing that invisibly, and it's not important even that we know that. That's just kind of the magic of how it all works. But they said the reason they're coming consciously at this point in time is they wanted for me to begin to give a series of transmissions. And the transmissions are meditations that are done as an online meeting. We do them once a month, and each one is given a theme or an energy. And I've been doing them now for just over 2 years. So each one has a different topic or a different theme of energy that is related to the meditation that we're doing together. And through the first cycle of 12, or the first year, it was kind of a foundational ascension journey. And then in the second year, the transmissions were all about, in retrospect, I understood this. At the beginning, I didn't, but in retrospect, it was all about going into galactic spaces and making connections with various aspects of energy that we need to bring together to hold them cohesively in our consciousness space to work forward. The third session began in October, and it's called Weaving the Diamond Light. And it's all about bringing that integration and access to those energy fields into the form world through the meditations that we're doing. And so the first three were all about Akashic clearing of maternal and paternal and soul's Akashic lines. And the next series that start January, February, March are shamanic journeys about retrieving aspects of consciousness within the soul's structure. And so the meditations are done in a way where it's an online meeting. There's a teaching of 90 minutes that it's given, and then we'll do a collective meditation. But I make the meditations available to people for free so that even if you don't participate in the online meeting, you can still do the meditation and connect with the energy of the experience. So those are available on the website as well. There's a tab at the top for the Syrians. So that's who they are and why they made themselves known to me at this point in time.
Yes, wow, wonderful. And these gatherings are so powerful and uplifting. And just as if you've enjoyed this talk, you will love the gatherings that Dr. John is speaking about. I'll just say it that way. Now, people are asking for the link to learn more, so I'll put your free gift in the chat here.
Sure.
And would you like to say a few words about your free gift?
Yeah, sure. So what I like to do when we do gatherings like this is to make a little contest where people can enter, and 3 people would be selected randomly by spirit to be the winner. And I will give a package of the 3 sessions of unity field healing to that person. And so it's a full audio package of the work. So 3 people will receive that as a gift. So all you have to do is just enter your name and email and into the competition. And then I'll notify the winners of the package and give them the access to that package.
Okay, yes, wonderful. And then so drjohnryan.org is also your main website, right?
I have 2 websites, Jocelyn. The Unity Field work, there's a website, unityfieldhealing.com, all one word, Unity Field Healing. And so that's a more direct access for information around these things. And then the drjohnryan.org is just my personal webpage, but there is a link on that to the Unity Field Healing website as well.
Okay, great. I pulled up the unityfieldhealing.com. I'll put that in the chat too, so everybody can find your work and all the different aspects of it. And for anyone watching this later as a recording, just scroll down a little bit below the video and you will find those links there below as well. Wow. Well, thank you. I would love to open up for a question or two from the audience, if that's okay with you. Everybody has been putting so much gratitude into the chat as we're speaking here. This is really like opening things up for them, new levels of understanding at many, many levels. So yeah, thank you so much for all that you are sharing here.
Thank you.
It really helps. So does anybody have any questions? And I can't take a whole lot, but if there are a couple of questions, I'm sure we could get to one or two of them. So please put them in the chat here on Zoom or in YouTube if you would like to ask Dr. John something here. Okay, so Janine was asking this in an earlier question too. You spoke about the divine mothers. Are there divine fathers?
So the nature of creation is that life is propagated through the female energy. So it's why women have such an important spiritual foundation on the planet. This is not the energy of the spiritual systems we've been living in, but it's the way it needs to return to. And so the women, if you think about it, through the vehicle of a woman, I'm going to speak in really strange technical terms here, through the vehicle of a woman, you can bring life into the planet from an invisible realm of being. So it's only a woman's body that has the capacity to do that. So the reason that women come, or the divine mothers come to do that, is that's how seeding takes place. But yes, there are aspects of divine masculine, and the divine masculine works with the divine feminine in the emergence and development of life. So yes, there are divine fathers too. But that's the reason the mothers are given so much significance in the story.
Okay. Yes, that makes sense. And Teja is asking, do animals and other sentient beings here on the earth, plants, minerals, etc., also contain these seeds of divinity?
So this is really interesting, and it's an important understanding, and often a misunderstanding. It's only the human being that carries this direct divine link, this consciousness link. But the whole system is part of a cohesive system. So the earth and all the kingdoms are divine by nature of their creation. They're created by a divine impulse, just the way human beings are. But the consciousness aspect is unique to the human being. So this 24th chromosome, for example, that we're talking about, it wouldn't be found in an animal, even an animal that's close to us, like a pet. Pets are part of a kingdom. And so they have a collective consciousness, and they work within the matrix or the matter of the divine feminine creation of the whole planet. So each kind of creation has its own realm or spectrum of existence, and we all live and work together in a collective sphere that's divinely impulsed. So they're part of divinity, but humans are unique for the reasons that I just explained. So that's a whole topic unto itself. I'm going to do a seminar this year, I think specifically on the 24th chromosome, because people really want to understand that information, and we'll cover some of those topics in it when I do.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Wow. Well, thank you again so much for all
pleasure,
you
Jocelyn.
shared here. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and always so enlightening, and just brings such clarity and new levels, layers of understanding. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thanks for all of the work you do. The conference is beautiful. It's amazing to hear about all the information from all the different speakers and how it all blends together. It's really beautiful. So thank you too.
Thank you so much. Yes. Is there anything else you wanted to say about any projects or programs coming up that you want people to know about? be aside from what I've
The
shared?
most active things right now are the transmissions are done monthly, so people can access those and join the online meeting for those. It's a very different experience, I find, doing the full registered meeting, because there's a whole teaching. There's a light language transmission that's only given with the teaching. It has to go along with the teaching. And so it's a little bit different than the meditations, but all of the meditations are there. And people can actually go back and purchase recordings of the prior full teachings as well. So you can have access to all of that if you want. The other thing is the practitioner training. So right now the work is growing. We have about 350 practitioners in Unity Field Healing worldwide. And so we do a number of online teaching programs each year. And so there are several lined up for this year. And the next seminar that I'll be doing is the 24th chromosome, but that's just in development now. So it'll probably be later in 2022 that we'll bring that teaching to life. And but if people connect to the website, join the email list, all that kind of stuff, I'll keep everybody up to date where the work is going and with new projects and new information. So that's probably the best way to stay in touch.
Okay, that's great. So yes, everybody, you definitely want to be on Dr. John's email list. Go and do that right now. Okay.
And,
Wow.
yeah.
Well,
And the other thing I just want to take a quick minute to say, Jocelyn, is these are tough times. Like, the planet is going through so much metamorphosis right now, and it's so difficult. And it's one thing to speak of high knowledge and wisdom and light, and yet we're all living in a very mundane 3D world with our lives and all the challenges of it at the same time. I just want to say to people, hang in there. We're at a precipice. Like, as we move through 22 and into 23 and 24, things are going to start lightening up a bit. And we're going to start to see real revelation of some of the energy of where we're going. And I just want to bring that out as a word of encouragement, because I know people are really tired. They're really discouraged in many ways. We've been isolated, locked down, restricted, all kinds of things, watching political things, all that kind of stuff. It's a mess. And it's all part of the change. We have to destructure so much of this old system in order to have the proper foundation for where we're going. And that's the real reason all of this is happening. So don't be discouraged by it. And I just want to encourage you or support you in the energy of having to live through it and to be aware that better things are really coming. So just hang in there. It's not too far away. And there'll be a few bumps on the road, but that's okay. Just stay aligned and stay with the process. And I send you all my love and blessings and energy to support you in the journey.
Thank you for that, for those encouraging words. It's really good to hear. And I feel like we're in this, darkest right before the dawn kind of place.
Very much.
Yeah. Yes. Wow. Well, this is what you've shared here has been very helpful for all of us on our path. So
Good.
Yeah. Well, blessings for everything that you're doing and working on, Dr. John. Thank you so much for being a part of Into the Mythica.
Always a pleasure, Jocelyn. Really.
Likewise.
And blessings to all.
Yes, and thank you so much, everybody who's joining us live here for this presentation. And also thank you to those who are watching this as a recording. Hope you've received so much from this talk with Dr. John. And do be sure to join us again at 1 p.m. Eastern. So that's in about an hour and 45 minutes from now. We have Michael Armstrong coming on to speak about the infinite nature of the soul. I'm sure this will be a really powerful one as well. So be sure to join us back on Zoom and YouTube at that time. And I'll see you all then. Much love, everybody. Many blessings. Lots of love. Bye.
Bye-bye.